The rain started just after midnight, tapping softly against the old farmhouse windows like hesitant fingers. Ethan hadn't been back in this house for years, not since the funeral. Now, standing in the dusty hallway of his father's home, the air felt heavier than he remembered, thick with the scent of forgotten memories and something older, like regret. He told himself he came only to clean the place before selling it, but that was a lie. He'd felt something tugging him back, a strange, restless pull that had grown stronger every day since his father's death anniversary passed last week. The attic door creaked when he opened it, the same way it did when he was a child sneaking up here to hide from his father's temper. The air was colder up here. Dust motes danced in the faint beam of his flashlight. Boxes, old trunks, and yellowed newspapers lay scattered like relics of a life Ethan never truly understood. He started clearing shelves, moving one box after another, when his boot caught on a warped plank. It lifted slightly under his weight. Curious, he crouched down, prying it open. Beneath it, wrapped in brittle parchment and bound by twine, was a small envelope. Its edges were stained dark, the handwriting unmistakable. To Ethan, when the time is right. The ink was faded, but the signature at the bottom froze him. John Hale. His father. His heart thudded once, hard. That couldn't be. His father had died 3 years ago, yet the date written on the envelope read June 14, 2023. A full year after the funeral. Ethan sat there, the letter trembling in his hand. Lightning flashed through the attic window, casting his shadow against the slanted ceiling. It felt wrong to open it, but something deeper, something instinctive, urged him to. He unfolded the letter slowly. My son, if you're reading this, it means I failed to keep my promise. There are things in this house you were never meant to see. But they're no longer safe to remain buried. You'll feel it soon, the truth pressing against the walls. Do not trust what you remember, Ethan. Memory lies. If you value your peace, never dig under the oak tree. That's where it began, and where it must end. The words hit him like cold water. His father was never poetic, never sentimental. Yet this sounded almost fearful, desperate. Ethan stared at the signature again, tracing the pen strokes with his thumb. It looked like his father's writing, but shakier, uncertain. A gust of wind blew through the small window, scattering dust. The attic light flickered, humming faintly before going out. In the darkness, Ethan felt a chill crawl up his neck. For a second, he thought he heard something, a faint knock from below. 3 slow, rhythmic taps echoing through the empty house. He froze. Waited. Nothing. He shoved the letter into his jacket pocket and forced himself downstairs. The house seemed alive now, every step groaning, every wall whispering secrets he wasn't ready to hear. He stopped at the front door and looked back once more toward the attic. His father's warning echoed in his mind, never dig under the oak tree. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Through the curtain, Ethan could see the tree swaying in the storm, tall, dark, and still standing where it always had. But the soil beneath it looked freshly turned. He stepped closer to the window, his reflection barely visible against the glass. That was when he noticed, in the reflection behind him, the attic door was open again. The storm hadn't stopped by morning. Gray clouds hung low over the fields, and rain traced slow rivers down the window pane. Ethan hadn't slept. Every creak, every gust, every whisper of wine through the house sounded like someone walking just out of sight. The letter was still on the table, its words burned into his mind. Never dig under the oak tree. He told himself it was nonsense, the product of a sick man's paranoia, but the memory of that freshly disturbed soil outside wouldn't leave him. That tree had been there his whole life, a crooked silhouette at the edge of the yard. But last night, in the flicker of lightning, he could have sworn he saw something half buried beside it. Something that didn't belong. By noon, the rain had thinned to a mist. Ethan pulled on his coat, stepping into the wet grass. The ground was soft, sucking at his boots as he made his way toward the oak. Each step closer tightened the knot in his chest. The air around the tree felt different, heavier somehow, like the world was holding its breath. He stopped a few feet away, staring at the dark soil near its roots. It wasn't just freshly turned. Someone had been there recently. The earth was uneven, and faint lines, like shovel marks, trailed away toward the fence. Kneeling, Ethan brushed the mud aside. Beneath it, something caught the light. Metal? He dug carefully with his hands until his fingers closed around a small rusted box. It was locked, but so corroded the latch gave with a twist. Inside lay a folded photograph and a tarnished brass key. The photo was of a boy. Younger Ethan. Smiling, maybe 7 years old, standing right in front of this very tree. Beside him was his father and another man. Tall, serious, wearing gloves. Ethan frowned. He didn't recognize the man, but what unsettled him most wasn't the stranger, it was the background. In the picture, behind the two men, stood another oak tree. Identical. But there had only ever been one. He turned the photo over. Scrawled in his father's handwriting were the words, "One must fall for the other to live." Ethan's pulse quickened. A clap of thunder rolled in the distance as he stood, clutching the box. Who was the man in the photo? And why did his father leave a key buried beneath this tree? He looked back toward the house. The attic window was still open. A faint movement caught his eye. Curtains shifting. But he was alone here. He was sure of it. Then, from behind the tree, came a sound, a low creak, like wood bending under weight. Ethan stepped back instinctively, his gaze darting to the roots. For a split second, it looked as though the ground moved. He blinked, and it was still again. He turned to leave, but his boots struck something solid under the mud. He bent down, brushing it aside. A second box. Smaller, newer, as if placed there recently. No rust. No dirt. On its lid, carved with care, were 3 words that froze him where he stood. For when he returns. The wind howled through the branches, making the leaves whisper above him. Ethan clutched the box, his breath fogging in the cold air. He didn't know what terrified him more, the fact that someone had been here, or the creeping realization that the letter had said he'd feel it soon. As he walked back toward the house, the oak behind him groaned again, the sound deep and alive. When he looked back, it wasn't just one tree anymore. There were 2. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the second box. It sat on the kitchen table, untouched, the words, "For when he returns," carved into the lid now etched into his brain. He hadn't opened it yet. Something about it felt wrong. Like the moment he did, he wouldn't be able to go back. By dusk, the rain had returned, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. Ethan poured himself a coffee he didn't drink and stared out the window toward the old barn. It loomed in the distance, half swallowed by mist, its doors hanging crooked. He hadn't been inside since his father's funeral. His father had always told him to stay out. "That place isn't for you, son," he used to say. But now, the word return echoed in Ethan's head, leading him toward that forbidden space. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the storm. The wet grass slapped against his legs as the barn grew larger in front of him. When he reached the doors, he hesitated. The hinges groaned as he pushed them open, releasing a breath of air that smelled like rust and decay. Inside, dust floated in the beam of his flashlight like slow snow. Tools hung untouched, cobwebbed, preserved in silence. But something was off. The air felt thick, heavy with the kind of stillness that hides movement. Then he saw it. At the back of the barn, half concealed behind old hay bales and broken boards, was a narrow wooden door he didn't remember. It looked newer than the rest of the structure. Fresh wood. Clean edges. And at its center, an old brass keyhole. Ethan's heart pounded as he pulled the small key from his pocket, the one from the box beneath the tree. He held it up, and for a moment, the fit seemed perfect. His father's handwriting flashed through his mind, "One must fall for the other to live." He inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. The door opened an inch. A gust of cold air spilled out, carrying a faint, metallic scent. He pushed the door wider and raised his flashlight. What he saw made his stomach tighten. It wasn't a room. It was a chamber, small, windowless, and lined with shelves of old notebooks and photographs. In the center stood a single chair. Chains hung from the ceiling above it, and beneath them, faint stains darkened the wooden floor. He stepped closer, scanning the walls. The shelves were filled with labeled journals, each marked with a date. Some went back decades. He picked one at random, 1978, Experiments on Memory. The first page was written in his father's handwriting. If this works, he'll never remember what happened here. Ethan's breath hitched. The pages that followed described trials, failures, and a name that kept appearing, subject. He read faster, fingers trembling. E shows progress. His memory resets after each attempt. He believes the house is new. The oak trees mark the test sites. His heart stopped. Ethan. A noise broke the silence, a faint footstep. He swung his flashlight toward the door, but it was still closed. Then another step, closer but from above. He aimed the light upward. The ceiling board shifted. Dust rained down. Someone was walking overhead. He backed toward the door, pulse racing. Then, as he reached for the handle, a voice whispered from the darkness behind him, familiar, strained, and low. "You weren't supposed to open it, son." The flashlight flickered out. Darkness swallowed everything. Ethan woke up on the cold barn floor. His head throbbed, and his flashlight lay beside him, its beam rolling weakly across the walls. The hidden room's door stood open, revealing the same shelves, the same chair, but the chains now swung gently, as if someone had just moved them. He stood slowly, every breath trembling. The voice from before, his father's, still echoed in his skull. "You weren't supposed to open it, son." But that couldn't be. His father was gone. Buried 3 years ago under the oak tree on the hill. Ethan picked up the flashlight and aimed it at the shelves again. This time, something new caught his eye. A photo frame rested near the edge of one shelf, covered in a thick layer of dust. He wiped it clean, and froze. It was a picture of his father, standing beside another man who looked exactly like him. The same sharp jawline. The same eyes. The same faint scar above the eyebrow. But on the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Elias and Eric, 1978. Ethan frowned. He'd never heard that name before. His father never mentioned a brother. He flipped through the journal again, scanning the pages. The handwriting spoke of tests, memory suppression, erased events. And in one entry, scrawled between 2 lines, were 5 words that made his stomach twist. E replaced Eric. He doesn't know. He stumbled back, the flashlight trembling in his hand. His pulse raced as the truth began to unravel in front of him. The initials, the dates, the key, the subject E. What if the father who raised him wasn't protecting him, but hiding him? Then he noticed something else in the photograph. Behind the 2 men stood the barn. But unlike now, it wasn't rotting, it was newly built. And above the door, burned faintly into the wood, were the words, "Memory Division." A sharp noise cut through the air, a floorboard creaking behind him. Ethan turned, flashlight shaking, and caught a glimpse of movement near the open door. A shadow lingered at the edge of the light, tall, still. "Who's there?" Ethan's voice cracked. The shadow didn't answer. It took 1 step closer and Ethan's chest tightened. Then the light caught its face for a fraction of a second, and he dropped the flashlight. The man in the shadows looked exactly like him. He blinked, but the figure was gone. Only silence remained, heavy and suffocating. Ethan scrambled for the flashlight, heart hammering. He swept the beam across the walls, but nothing moved. Then he saw it. A small photograph had fallen from one of the shelves. He picked it up. It showed a boy, maybe 7 or 8, standing beside 2 men, the same twins from before. The boy's face was blurred by age, but his outline, his posture, his eyes, they were unmistakable. It was him. A whisper crawled out from the dark, the same strained voice he'd heard before. "You were never meant to remember, Ethan." He spun toward the sound, but the room was empty again. The whisper lingered like a chill in his bones. Ethan clutched the photograph tightly, his breath uneven. There was only one way to know the truth now, to find out who Elias and Eric really were, and which one of them was his real father. He turned toward the barn door and stepped into the night. But as he walked back toward the house, the light in the attic window flickered on by itself. Someone was waiting for him there. The attic light pulsed faintly through the cracks in the ceiling as Ethan climbed the stairs. Each step groaned under his weight, dust spiraling through the air like ghosts disturbed from their rest. His heart pounded with every creak. Whoever, or whatever, had turned that light on was waiting above him. When he reached the top, the bulb swung gently, casting long shadows that twisted across the walls. The old furniture sat where it always had, covered in white sheets, untouched for years. But on the desk by the window lay something new, a cassette tape and a note written in his father's handwriting. "If you're hearing this, you've gone too far." Ethan stared at the tape recorder beside it. His hands shook as he pressed play. Static filled the room, followed by the unmistakable voice of his father, calm, broken, tired. "Ethan, or Eric, whichever name you believe now. If this tape has reached you, it means the memories have started to come back." Ethan's throat tightened. "What memories?" he whispered under his breath. The recording continued. "There were two of you once. You and your brother. You weren't supposed to exist at the same time. They made a mistake, I made a mistake. When the experiment failed, they ordered me to erase one of you. But I couldn't. So I hid you, Ethan. I made everyone believe Eric was gone." The air left Ethan's lungs. He stumbled back, gripping the edge of a shelf to steady himself. "I erased your memories. I moved us here, to this town, to start over. But I never stopped hearing him. He's still out there, somewhere between what's real and what's left of the experiment." The static grew louder, the voice fading in and out. "If you've found the barn, the letters, the photographs, then he's close. You can't trust what you see anymore. The mind forgets what it can't handle, and yours is trying to protect you." The tape clicked off, leaving a void of silence that pressed on Ethan's ears. He stood motionless, staring at the recorder, his reflection flickering faintly in the attic window. His mind spun between disbelief and dread. Two brothers. One erased. One reprogrammed. He looked back at the note. There was another line he hadn't seen before, scrawled in smaller letters. "Don't open the basement door." Ethan's blood ran cold. He hadn't even thought about the basement since moving back into the house. His father had sealed it years ago after calling it unsafe. But now, it felt like the final piece of the truth weighted down there. Then, from below, the house creaked, slowly, deliberately. Footsteps moved through the hallway. Ethan froze, his breath shallow. The light bulb above him flickered violently, casting flashes of darkness between bursts of dim yellow glow. He turned off the recorder and strained to listen. The steps stopped right at the base of the attic stairs. "Dad." His voice barely broke the silence. No answer. Only the sound of soft breathing. Then, from the shadows below, a voice, low and eerily familiar, called up to him. "You shouldn't have played the tape, brother." Ethan's stomach dropped. He stumbled backward, the words echoing in his head like a nightmare finally remembered. The air grew colder, and the attic door began to close on its own, inch by inch. Before it shut completely, Ethan whispered to himself, "I have to know the truth." He grabbed a flashlight and sprinted for the basement door. Rain drizzled over the old cemetery as Ethan stood before a headstone so weathered that the name was barely legible. His breath came out in shaky clouds. The flashlight he carried flickered weakly, its beam sliding over the carved letters. Eric Graves, beloved son. Lost too soon. The name struck him like a hammer. His father's voice from the tape echoed in his mind. "There were two of you once." Ethan dropped to his knees, tracing the letters with trembling fingers. He wanted to believe it was coincidence. But the dates matched his childhood, the year he forgot everything. He whispered to himself, "This can't be real." But a low voice behind him answered, "It's as real as the man who buried the truth." Ethan spun around. A tall figure stood under a black umbrella at the edge of the path. The man's face was shadowed, his posture unnervingly calm. He wasn't from town. Ethan had never seen him before. The stranger stepped closer, boots crunching on the gravel. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded. The man tilted his head. "Someone who's been waiting for you to remember." Ethan gripped the flashlight tighter. "Did my father send you?" A faint smile tugged at the stranger's lips. "Your father? He sent all of us in one way or another. But he never finished what he started." The man knelt beside the grave, setting down a small metal box. It looked decades old, its edges rusted and dented. He tapped the lid lightly. This belonged to him. Ethan hesitated before opening it. Inside lay a photograph. 2 boys, identical, smiling in front of a farmhouse. His chest constricted. "That's me." The man shook his head. "That's both of you." Ethan stared at the picture until his vision blurred. The memory it carried felt alive. Laughter in the fields, 2 voices shouting the same name. Then the flash of light, the smell of burning, and his father's voice screaming, "Don't look back." He staggered to his feet. "You're lying. My brother died." The stranger's tone dropped to a near whisper. "Then why do you keep hearing his voice?" Thunder cracked above them. The wind howled, rattling the dead trees. Ethan's flashlight blinked out completely, plunging them into shadows. In the distance, between flashes of lightning, Ethan saw a silhouette, small, unmoving, standing by another grave. The stranger turned to look, but the figure vanished with the next bolt of lightning. Ethan's pulse raced. Who was that? "The one who never left," the man said softly. "Eric doesn't rest. Not until you open the door your father sealed." Ethan swallowed hard. "The basement." The stranger nodded. "Your father tried to bury what he couldn't destroy. But graves don't hold secrets forever." Before Ethan could speak again, the man began to walk away, fading into the storm like smoke. "Wait!" Ethan called after him. "Tell me who you are." The stranger paused just long enough to say, "I'm what's left of what he tried to forget." Then he was gone. Only the sound of rain remained. Ethan turned back to the grave. The soil beneath the headstone was freshly disturbed, as though someone had dug there recently. And half buried in the mud was something metallic, another cassette tape. His heartbeat roared in his ears as he pulled it free, wiping off the dirt. The label, written in the same shaky handwriting as before, read, "Play this when you're ready to meet him." Ethan looked toward the house glowing faintly in the distance. He whispered, "I'm ready." Ethan stood in the center of his father's house, the second cassette trembling in his hands. The storm still raged outside, wind clawing at the windows as thunder rolled over the hills. The message on the label, "Play this when you're ready to meet him," echoed in his mind like a threat. He inserted the tape into the old player sitting on the dusty table. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then his father's voice, aged, broken, trembling, filled the silence. "Ethan," it said, "if you found this, it means the past refused to stay buried. I never wanted you to see that room. But Eric, he wouldn't let go." Ethan froze. The name alone sent a chill through him. "There's a key in the drawer beneath the stairs," the voice continued. "It opens the door in the basement wall. Whatever you do, don't stay in there long. That room was never meant to exist." The tape clicked off. Ethan's breathing grew shallow. He crossed the hall, each creak of the floorboards echoing through the house. He opened the drawer beneath the stairs. Inside, an old iron key lay on a stack of yellowed papers. The basement door groaned as he pushed it open. The air was thick with dust and mold, the kind that burned his lungs. His flashlight beam trembled as he descended the steps. The walls were lined with tools, shelves, and forgotten relics. But at the far end, something was wrong. The wall didn't look like the others. The texture was newer, smoother, almost patched over. He approached, running his fingers across the plaster. Beneath the paint, he felt a faint outline of a door. He inserted the key into a barely visible lock, hidden behind a layer of dirt. It turned with a sound that seemed to echo through time. The wall shifted. A cold breath of air rushed out as the hidden door creaked open. Inside was a small room untouched for decades. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, still flickering with weak light as if waiting for him. Old photographs lined the walls. His mother, his father, and 2 young boys. Twins. Him and Eric. On the floor, a child's toy car lay beside a dark stain that trailed toward the corner. Ethan knelt down, fingertips brushing the cold concrete. The smell of burned wood lingered faintly, the same scent that haunted his earliest memories. There was something else, a wooden chest beneath the far wall. He opened it slowly, expecting dust and relics. But instead, inside lay a series of journals. His father's handwriting filled the pages, frantic and slanted. He read the first line aloud. The experiment failed. Eric didn't survive the fire, not entirely. Ethan's chest tightened. He flipped through the pages, sketches of strange symbols, notes about voice transfer and memory resonance. His father's words blurred as realization struck him. His father hadn't been trying to forget Eric. He had been trying to bring him back. A sound echoed behind him, faint, like a whisper pressed against the wall. "Ethan." He froze. The voice was childlike, muffled, coming from somewhere within the room. He turned, scanning the shadows, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, clearer this time. "You left me here." The bulb above flickered violently, then went out. In the pitch-black darkness, Ethan's trembling hand brushed the cold wall and felt another hand press back. He stumbled toward the door, fumbling for the key. The whisper turned into a quiet, sorrowful sob. "Don't leave me again." Ethan finally yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He stared at the locked door, chest heaving, knowing the truth he feared most: Eric wasn't gone. He was still in the house. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house, every shift of the floor, every hum of the wind, felt alive. He sat at the kitchen table, the journals spread before him, their ink-stained pages whispering a truth he wasn't ready to face. His father had tried to erase something, not just a memory, but a mistake that refused to die. The words in the final journal entry repeated over and over in Ethan's mind. "I had to seal the room. The voices won't stop unless the door stays closed." By morning, the storm had passed, leaving a quiet so heavy it felt unnatural. Ethan's hands trembled as he picked up the last cassette labeled in fading marker, "The Truth." He inserted it into the player. His father's voice filled the room, calm yet broken. "Ethan, I know you've found the room. I know you've seen the journals. What you need to understand is that Eric didn't die in the fire. Not completely. His mind, his voice, it clung to the walls, to this house. I tried to help him. I tried to save him." The pause. Then a quiet sob. "But I failed. I thought if I sealed the room, if I buried the memory, maybe he would fade. But he didn't. He stayed, waiting for you." Ethan's breath caught. His father hadn't been protecting himself. He had been protecting him. Suddenly, a sharp thud echoed from the basement. Then again. The same rhythm as before. Ethan stood, flashlight shaking in his grasp. He walked down the stairs, the light flickering against the walls. The hidden door was open. Inside, the bulb was lit again, steady this time. The air was colder, thicker, and in the center of the room stood a small figure. A boy, no older than 10, dressed in the same striped shirt Ethan remembered from a long-forgotten photograph. "Eric," he whispered. The boy turned. His face was pale, eyes hollow yet full of sorrow. "You weren't supposed to come back," he said softly. "He promised you'd forget." Ethan stepped closer, his heart pounding. "What did he do to you?" Eric tilted his head. "He tried to make me whole again. But something went wrong. I became part of this place. The walls remember me, Ethan. The floor does too." The air buzzed, faint whispers circling the room, growing louder with every heartbeat. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. "Make it stop," he screamed. Eric looked down at him, tears cutting through the dust on his cheeks. He wanted to bury the truth. "You were never supposed to know. I wasn't supposed to exist anymore." The walls groaned, cracks snaking through the plaster as if the house itself was breathing. Ethan grabbed the journals, desperate. "There has to be a way to end this." The boy's voice trembled. "There is, but it means you have to remember everything." Before Ethan could respond, the bulb exploded, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers turned to screams. A cold wind swirled through the space, pulling the pages of the journals into the air like feathers. Then, silence. Ethan opened his eyes. He was standing alone in the living room. The door to the basement was gone, as if it had never existed. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered, like the memory of a fire long extinguished. He looked down. In his hand was a single torn page from his father's journal. The final line read, Some secrets aren't buried in the ground. They're buried inside us. Ethan looked toward the wall where the basement door once stood. The faint sound of breathing echoed from behind it, slow, rhythmic, familiar. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're still here, aren't you?" The breathing stopped. Then, softly, a child's voice replied, "Always." And the light above him flickered out.